Hell yeah. So we're using shapes of Jackson kayaks to come up with a cool R1 boat. Now, I'm going to show in this footage this picture of this playboat being on top, but what I mean is that it should be on the bottom. I just wanted to show you how this is a scoop, but if that's on the bottom, hell yeah, that can kind of scoop. And this would be the profile, and the bottom being lower to the water than the side tubes, and so that allows you that rocker. We talk about that in this video. And then also just kind of a picture of what that would look like. I think a redesign of having the side cat tubes come higher up out of the water. So from a playboat perspective, hell yeah, I want to actually do a nose ender on that front tube and then have this for secondary stability. Okay, so hell yeah, enjoy the video. Alright, hell yeah, a little bonus video tonight. So yesterday I kind of put this together in Photoshop. This might be what I want out of an R1 playboat. I'm thinking play, but also from that we're talking about edges, you know what I mean, moving around the boat. Using this compartment as being able to get to the back and then tilt the boat up, and then also corners. So even just sliding from, sliding slightly back, it can elevate the front of the boat. Jumping on corners also, and then using your corners to pick up stability. And so this kind of came from the idea that potentially you want your boat to be more square or maybe more pointed ends. If this is going to be the full width of the boat, might as well use it, use that entire width. Now, what I'm getting rid of though in this design is having any sort of 12 inch or greater flat surfaces. And so that's what catarafts do. That's what kind of these pointy ends of this. You have stabbing motions. And then there's kind of another take home of this video is redesigning the side of this, because what I'm going to be looking at doing on any of these current R1 boats is to establish a flat platform on top of a traditional raft or cataraft or paddle cat, and then kind of foam out. And then what that allows, even on a paddle cat, is for me to get to the corner of a paddle cat. Because even right now, if this was a paddle cat, it's very difficult to either, sit back onto this outer tube, or if I'm facing that way, to sit back on one of these farther tubes without kind of falling towards the middle. And even in a paddle cat, you can't even sit back. Like right now, if you had a flat platform on a paddle cat on my RMR Fat Cat, I would be able to effectively actually get the bow up, and that can be very beneficial. Now, what I've been, the big redesign is to get rid of this round tube. I think this round tube, once it rolls over, because I'm getting my boat up to pretty high edge angles, but what happens there is this is now a pivot point, and once I'm at that high edge angle, it's already hitting its point of impending tip. See how this is just a one surface? So the thing that I want to explore is to cut a diagonal through these rounded tubes and have almost a flat surface. And then what I want is to experiment with that flat surface coming to a point. So all your flotation and buoyancy is going to be up here. And then so if I am just sitting in a neutral position, the boat's already going to be, tilted onto the floor because the floor is protruded. And then maybe this flat edge. And somewhere maybe in between, ish, to where it's not going totally flat. But hopefully what I'm interested in is having that drop totally flat, and then you pick up a huge amount of stability with this part of the boat not, tipping the boat over. And then also what I might want to experiment with is to, instead of a flat cockpit, seating, is to actually angle that. And so while you're rocking over, you're feeling more stable. So if this is your traditional flat spot on top of a raft, you can have this either continuously curved. But the reason why I want a side point here is if this thing is going into a wave sideways and you have big old 18-inch to bigger tubes on an R1 raft, there is no punching. So the second you hit a hole, Alright, hell yeah, new battery, sorry about that. But hell yeah, so I really do think this could be the biggest improvement in R1 is if I'm already wanting a flat cockpit to even a flared up cockpit for the seating, I definitely want that to come to a point, and I want that flat surface. Now this is one of those things where it's just like, it seems like this isn't going to work because you're just always going to be tipped over onto that surface. But even from a traditional design of an 18-inch, I have put a sponson right here. You know what I mean? So then that is and I've been able to tip over even onto that sponson, but then you still have, you know, just two tiny points of contact. You know, if you do tip it over onto there, the boat can still just over tip, and so your contact is just like tipping over a box that's only like that. So to have something to really extend this out as much as possible and still be able to paddle over it and still, you know, feel like you can sit in, you know, that critical spot where you're not going to tip it over, where you can kind of still maintain a fairly level trajectory. And I think we can do that by just having the floor lower and then having this first bump out. You know what I mean? So you have this first double edge, and those are your 2 points that are going to contact. So, and I think having like this, having your normal sitting position be a little bit unstable, to where it's either going to fall flat or fall on this more stable surface, I think that's better than having a huge chunk of stability, and then the second you tip over the box, you know what I mean? And that's what it is. Like R1 rafting is like we're literally sitting on the corner of a box, and then the second we get torque to lift this surface off, we're done. We're tipping. And so that's kind of what I have found. So anyway, and then the cool parts of this boat, and I showed this to show you the Playboat underneath. What I really want is the ability to, when you're in a neutral position, I mean, a Playboat has plenty of buoyancy to hold yourself, and then even with an R1 raft, even if you have auxiliary, you know, materials, having that, you know, small contact point that then you can tip over onto a larger surface. But even my final design, again, I think the take home is still going to be different. I really do think you want a rockered surface this way. And that's also when stabbing holes. When this thing goes sideways and to stab into a hole, you definitely want more of a point, so you actually have some cushion in there. What's been happening is if you slam into a hole sideways in an R1 raft, you just instantly stop. You either get thrown over the handlebars. If you hunker down, you might actually just purl into a flip. And so this does two things. It allows you to angle an edge and then stab your way through. And so this side of the boat, from a surfing perspective, shouldn't purl. And so, hell yeah. I definitely, and then the other thing that I haven't really gone over, and it's really hard to draw, is that these outer tubes are going to be rockered up more than this. And one thing that I wanted to play around with is it's kind of fun in a playboat just to paddle forward and then dig into the water. I do want that. I actually want to be able to like dig into the water and then start to buck this boat a little bit. Even in a flat water scenario where the boat actually starts to tip up, and then, you know, so these would be higher up out of the water. And so just as you have these on the side tubes go up to a point, I definitely want these tubes to go from this surface all the way up to a point up here where, yeah. So if this is your leading surface, I want those other tubes to be higher than that. You know what I mean? So at every elevation over here that this is hitting, these tubes are higher, and so this can stab in. Yeah, so hell yeah. That's I should make this out of clay actually. I never even thought about that. But anyway, so hell yeah, this was kind of my design. And it doesn't matter if it's rotomolded plastic. You know, a lot of this, a good material, like, because if I want this to be kind of like a 4-inch, what did I draw? I said like 4 inch, let's say 4-inch drop stitch inflatable top, you know, where you have your inset of your cockpit, and then everything else is fleshed out over that. But it did come from the idea that if you have like this 4-inch, you know, kind of square shape, then you can kind of work from that. And even if this was just a 4-inch, just think about that, a 4-inch square, you know, like of stand-up paddleboard material, when you go to sit on the back edge, one, like you're in a comfortable spot, and then the other is that you can actually tip that into the water, and you could probably pick up a lot of secondary stability. I started with this idea because this right here, even on my boat and all the R1 boats, whether it's sharper or like this, it's such a turning factor. A couple of things: you have the height of the tube, which doesn't need to be there. That's why, you know, having a boat that's very pointed, like a diamond shape all the way around the boat. So having your top surface, and then just having a 4-inch, and then having steep rocker wherever that's going to hit. So you actually have some sort of stab. So you have a chance to stab and then also sub. Like subbing these components would be really good. Even if this is the front, like having this front actually sub, I think you can gain a ton of stability from subbing an R1 over, yeah, so there could be a huge benefits there. Alright, so I think I'm done with that. I just wanted to kick this out, and maybe I'll actually make this out of clay or something. I think that could be pretty sweet. Alright, thanks for joining me. Booyah.